Welcome to the WoW podcast, where we bring you inspiring stories and insights from our university community. Tune in for conversations about growth, success, and the power of communication in the academic world. So get ready to soar with us on the wings of wisdom.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to another episode of Wings of Wisdom. I'm your host, Dr. Mohsin Bensaid, and today my co-host is the wonderful Zach Van Farrow. Zach,
Yes.
how's it going?
Not bad. About 10 weeks through the semester, so stuff is picking up, but
All right. Would you like to introduce our guest?
yes, I can't. So good morning, good afternoon, and good night to all of our listeners. Today we are excited to welcome the Distinguished Associate Professor of Management in the College of Business and Economics at Ashland University. Since joining the faculty in 2013, Dr. Schmeller has been dedicated to teaching. She focuses in strategic planning, organizational development, and organizational behavior at both the undergraduate and graduate levels. She received her PhD from Indiana State University and has significant experience in the industry with Procter & Gamble. So she brings a wealth of knowledge to her students. She's also currently actively engaged in research, presenting her findings on business simulations and trends to audiences around the world. Dr. Rebecca Schmeller, welcome to the Wings of Wisdom podcast.
Thank you, Zach and Mohsin.
Yeah, so I guess I can start off with a question. As a non-Kobe student, so I've never taken a Kobe class. I will probably never take a Kobe class. What do you think the value is for business and economics for a non-major, non-minor, for someone like me?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And Zach, I'm sorry that I don't know you, and I'm so glad we're getting to meet in this way. And I do want to know more about you. So Can you give me a quick background about yourself?
Yeah. So I'm a junior. My majors are psychology and religion. I really like the humanities, so I'd like to get to grad school, go to seminary after undergraduate here. Haven't nailed down a place yet, but that's the plan. I work in like Dr. Chartier's Psychological Science Accelerator for psychology, and then I minor in history. So I'm also part of the Ashland Scholars Program. So I really like the humanities.
Yeah, he does a lot. He also helps out Dr. Kurt Ikas, a best-selling author on mental game and children's books.
Oh my gosh, I don't know about this.
Yeah, that was a fun little project. He writes children's books for teaching the mental game strategies, specifically in baseball. And so I don't know if you've ever read like Return of the Home Run Kid or the Matt Christopher type books, but he kind of models his stories off of those types of like engagements with his younger audiences. And then I got the opportunity through the Writing Center to edit the book for him, which was a huge opportunity. And it was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot.
Wow, that's fantastic. And this Dr. Igras, you said, is his name?
Yeah,
Yes.
Kurt Ikas, yeah.
And what college is he in?
He taught psychology. He was in psychology department. I think he taught for almost 30 years at EU. He's retired now.
Oh, I don't think I know him. So wow, what interesting that I don't know him. I mean, I've only been around 13 years. But this is really cool. So the mental game is kind of his focus, and you mentioned Return of the Home Run Kid. I don't know about this at all. Are these like young adult books or?
Yeah, so they're focused, I think, primarily like 3rd through 7th graders, I'd say. So I'd say more like elementary, middle school rather than young adult.
Okay, wow. Well, I will definitely follow up with that. And I am so happy for you that you had the opportunity to serve as an editor, as a junior college.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah.
Zach, that's pretty fancy. I didn't get my first editor role until I think maybe 2021 when I served as an editor on a journal or proceedings from a conference that I sometimes present at and publish in the proceedings. So, and then since then I've served as an editor on a couple of other journals, and I'm way farther than you in years and experience. So that's pretty impressive that you got that done so early in your life and your career. Good for you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, and also that sounds like a great combination with your major and your majors and your other activities. So that could give you all kinds of pathways, I'm thinking, career-wise.
Yeah, that's the hope. So I'd like to hopefully teach theology and ethics at some point at the college level. But I'm going to start by getting my MDiv, so the Master's of Divinity, which will open more doors than like an MA will.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the hope, to keep the doors open.
Yeah, that sounds great. It sounds very well thought. I think it's great that you're being so thoughtful about how to approach it. And I always use the metaphor of doors when people ask, how do I choose or how do I plan? And I'm like, well, interestingly enough, you don't always get much choosing or planning. A lot of it is being aware of the doors and kind of, knowing where they are, and then also sort of watching to see when they open. So I think it sounds like you're pretty well versed or well experienced with that metaphor.
So as you may guess, Zach will be asking the smart questions today. So.
I love it. Yeah. And I think I'm like, Zach, I'm so glad that you are latched on to these really good resources at AU. Chris Chartier is a friend of mine, and I'm a big fan of the work that he does, and not only his work, but his whole persona. I really admire him as a person. So what a great resource for you. Mm-hmm. And then also the Ashbrook Center is just, so vibrant, so many things going on there. It's pretty exciting. So good for you that you're a part of all of it. And back to your original question about, poor Zach doing all this really cool stuff at AU and not a minute of it at Kobe.
Right.
So that's your question, which is a great question, is, what are you missing out on? So I really appreciate that question, because I know that's an example of, what we say about universities is we've got everything, right? We're a universal experience. So that is one, I guess, in a way, tragedy of the university experience, is that it's impossible to do it all.
Yes, yeah.
And students, unfortunately, sometimes pick and choose, and then also sometimes just go through the doors that happen to be open or that they happen to know about. So I really appreciate your question and your being aware of the fact that there's this thing across the street in the College of Business on College Avenue that you're not really a part of. And there's a lot of cool stuff going on at Kobe. So similarly to what's happening in the psychology department, religion department, and the Ashbrook Center, and of course with your emeritus professor and the author who you're helping as an editor, we have some of those same things going on in Kobe for our students. So I think your question was more about what would the value be to someone like you to be a part of Kobe. Yeah. And it is valuable. I have had several students in Kobe who are part of Ashbrook or are part of the honors program or both. I've also had students who are minoring or double majoring in psychology and, find a way to partner business with any of those topics. So Ashbrook, honors, psychology, religion. I do have one advisee this semester who is, I believe, double majoring in religion, but that's something I don't think I've had experience with. So, but there are definitely great overlaps. As I sometimes tell my students, we call ourselves the College of Business, which by a lot of standards means the College of Math, and the College of Data, and the College of Numbers, because business is all about calculating. Its unit of measure is money. So that's an interesting concept to think about. And money basically is nothing if not counted or, calculated in some way. So it gets kind of philosophical when you go down that path of thinking. And so I really enjoy that path with my students, and I sometimes joke about how, I make sarcastic comments about across the street at AU, and I say, oh, they think they have all the art and all the science. But in fact, we in the College of Business surprisingly have a lot of art and science also. Mm-hmm. Right, and one of my favorite examples is the headlines in the Wall Street Journal. they're quite often very dramatic, and I like to compare them to Shakespeare.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
So it's, I kind of go both ways. Of course, I'm loyal to my College of Business, but I also really like what's happening across the street. But I want my students to know that even though they're not living across the street, they're also doing really cool and beautiful things. So it's actually one of my little side or motivations. I really want business students to understand the beauty of business. That it's not just math and calculation. And I think math professors would say the same thing. I think they want their students to understand the beauty of math.
Mm-hmm.
So those quantitative topics quite often get, maligned as being cut and dry or pure linear, and in fact, they're not.
Yeah, I wonder, those who are not really good with math, so to speak, maybe they don't perceive themselves as, proficient in math, but maybe they have an inclination toward business. They want to major in business, but because they don't feel like they are really strong um, mathematicians, what do you have to say to those students who are ambivalent to major in business management, economics, but maybe because of their kind of not so strong math skills,
Mm-hmm.
they choose different avenues?
Yeah, you guys have really good questions. We could spend the whole day on, we've had 2 questions so far, and I could spend the whole day on either of them. So first of all, that comment about not being good in math, that's got a lot of memes and associations. And I really, when students tell me that, I just disagree with, the first thing I do is disagree with them, because I think that's not true. I think that everyone has a basic ability in math. And I think it's similar to languages. When, children grow up in a language, they of course are familiar with it and confident in it because they grew up with it. And for some reason, some children just don't grow up with math. So they kind of early on, perhaps because of the way it's presented to them or the way they perceived it, they take on this faulty self-definition. But I think with the proper mindset and patience, and this is where I'm going to use the word linearity, the step-by-step, anyone can be good at math. So I do understand that there's a tendency for some people to be more quantitatively oriented. And so for that, the answer I give to students is that you just have to find your range within the world of math. So, for example, we in the College of Business, even our creative majors, the ones that are assumed to be artistic and creative, like fashion, merchandising, marketing, those quite often get sort of labeled as creative, and they clearly are, but they're also all about data. So fashion merchandising, it's, if you follow the Fashion Week in New York or Milan or Paris, that's big business. Right. And the companies, all of the events that are happening are governed by and really ruled by data analysis. So I really encourage students who think that they're not good at math to dig in their heels and figure it out, because that opens up this whole other world of how exciting fashion and marketing can be. Even human resources and organizational behavior, org development, all those things it's all about data.
Right.
Yeah. When I think of business, and I could be wrong, but I think of the word dynamic, because you can combine so many different things together and you can really do whatever you want with it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's usually the interpretation I get from my friends that are business majors, and maybe double major in something else, like marketing on the one end, and then you have stockbrokers on the other, or data analysts or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. It's very flexible. So, marketing is all about data too. Sure, there is some art in marketing because it has a big entertainment aspect, but it's marketing is purely about market share. That's what it boils down to. And that's nothing but a pie chart, which I think shows up in maybe the 3rd grade math curriculum.
Yeah.
So it's pretty basic stuff, yeah. And then, of course, line charts, like data trends over time. It's remarkable how simple a lot of the math is that we do in the College of Business. One of the classes I teach is our capstone for the business seniors, so business capstone. And what I have them do is hand draw charts. So they've spent, 3.5 years as a business student using Excel to make all their charts and data visualization. And I have them do a lot of exercises where they have to take a piece of paper and a pencil and actually draw the x-axis and the y-axis and plot the data and draw the trend line. They have to draw the pie chart and estimate what 10% looks like, and then the other 90%. So they quite often enjoy that. And I quite often at the end of the semester get feedback that, wow, that was really insightful.
Yeah, I always tell myself one day I'm going to be able to take classes. I just want to, take classes, just, audit classes, different classes across campus and see what's happening.
Same,
I think it'd be fun, yeah.
I didn't do that for 13 years. When I look at the catalog, I'm like, how come I'm not in that class? It's happening across the street or next door. I want to sit right there and take the class, but I can never get myself around to registering.
Right. So I want to back up a little bit. I would like to know more about Rebecca Schmeller, the undergraduate student. How was the experience for you?
That's a good question too, because I, like you, Zach, was an arts and sciences major.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I loved the arts and sciences. My undergraduate major was journalism, and I minored in history officially and French and art history unofficially. So I spent a lot of time in the arts and humanities buildings at LSU, which the big state school land grant institution in Louisiana.
Do you know Dr. Wendy Schaller for art history?
Yes, I know.
Okay.
Of her, yeah.
Yeah, I've had 2 for classes. I'm in one right now. And I love art history. I learned so much in that class from just her lecturing on different time periods and how the art reflects the culture. So I don't know if you took classes like that, but I'm assuming you did.
Yes, that's exactly why I loved it so much. And I think I took one class, which was a part of my core curriculum, like many students at Ashland do, and I was just hooked. So I just kept taking them, and that's why I ended up with that minor. I just could not get enough. And I even, as a senior at LSU, I even took the GRE because I wanted to go to grad school in art history. And I looked into it, and sadly, I just I shouldn't say sadly, I mean, that's an example of the doors, but I didn't quite, at that stage in my life, I didn't understand enough about the career paths and about what the options were. I think I was a little intimidated because it wasn't like, for example, the Career Center at LSU, there were never like art history companies interviewing.
Right, yeah.
It wasn't really clear to me what a career path would look like. And so I did, over the next few years after graduation, I remember still just passionately caring about it and loving all the museums that I got to go to as a young professional. And I remember like toying with the idea of, going down that path. I lived in Los Angeles early in my career, and we had the J. Paul Getty Museum. And I remember like thinking, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is like this world-class art museum. I live down the street. Maybe that's where I could have my art history career. But once again, it wasn't quite, I just didn't understand the doors or the doorways or the pathways. And I was too chicken to leave the path I was on, the sort of corporate path where I was getting paid and, enjoying myself. So that's, but I've always had a soft spot for the arts and sciences. I loved those courses as an undergrad.
So for your graduate, you majored in business. Was it an MBA?
Yeah, that's another example of doors, right? Because I was working for Procter & Gamble, which, as you probably know, is this big, giant global company that happens to be in Ohio. So that's, you can see maybe a little hint about my life course. I did, I was in Los Angeles for 10 years of my P&G career. And because I was kind of hooked on that, I liked the culture of the company. I liked my work. I liked my coworkers. Sure, it wasn't art history and it wasn't French, but I thought, maybe I could work there and maybe I could get transferred to France or Quebec. So I stayed with P&G, and when it came time, after 5 years at P&G, they offered tuition reimbursement. And so that's when I thought, okay, I do want to go to grad school. And once again, I'm kind of chicken, not quite brave enough to do the full-on grad school. So let me do this. Let me do this sort of part commitment while I'll stay fully employed and get the MBA, which was a degree that matched my work at P&G. And that's when I had a bit of an epiphany that business was art and beautiful. And that's when I became a business enthusiast. And all of my art history passion transferred to business.
Right. Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Like, how did you see the value of pursuing art during your undergrad reflected in your work as a professional, and also, again, like as a graduate student in Master of Business and Administration?
Yeah, those are such good questions. You guys, this is like a psychotherapy session.
You're too kind.
I should be journaling, responding to your prompts. It is really cool. Like, I think I do have a little bit of because of your question, I have some mixed feelings. I know that there is a school of thought that says that business is a professional school and that it's very technical and that undergraduates really should learn arts and sciences. And of course, there are many, I shouldn't say many, but there are many like world-class universities that do not teach business because they think of it as, more of a professional or trade type school, which is interesting because those same schools do have colleges of engineering and quite often departments of education, which are also considered professional schools. So I'm not sure how they claim, not to have business, but I do think there have been. I remember as an MBA student, one of my professors had us read some articles about that controversy of, is business, truly an academic pursuit, or is it more of a tactical, professional, almost trade school type pursuit? So that's kind of been an ongoing debate for a long time. It's kind of, the original, you could almost say that about every field of education, because originally education was just Greek and Latin, right? Those were the classics. It was, I think, largely to be able to translate religious scripts. So that's where it evolved. I guess education just continued to evolve. So I guess we could go back all the way to math and say, is that really, something that we should teach? Because it wasn't the classics. So, and definitely art and history, all those things I think have been controversial as topics that can be taught at an institution. And business, I guess, is, on that path. I'd say business is one of the newer ones. There's a famous story about Harvard Business School and how they kind of made business education famous. For a long time, business education was where schools taught typing and shorthand and how to use an adding machine. That's what it meant at some point in history. And then Harvard kind of created the idea of the case method, where they literally had captains of industry in the Boston region show up to campus with their briefcase. And they would, at the front of the class, they would open their case and pull out all the pro formas, the spreadsheets, and the documents they were using to manage their business. And they would review their business with business students. So that's more of a case study. But that's the legend, is that it comes from, captains of industry opening their briefcase.
Wow. Zach's brother, actually twin brother, goes to Denison. I don't think they have a business major at Denison.
They don't. Yeah.
No.
I was
Liberal
surprised.
arts, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. That's interesting, Zach. I know. Same there. The school, definitely Princeton does not have a business school, and I'm not sure about Harvard. I know has the MBA, the famous MBA, but they may not have it at the undergraduate level. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
And then some of the. Yeah,
I was wondering. like
Yeah.
obviously you teach the undergrad, so you would probably say we should teach business. But if you had to land on one side of the debate, where would you say you land?
Yeah, such a good question. And I think definitely ever since I had that aha moment as an MBA student, when I remember sitting in my accounting class going, oh, this is beautiful. This is so beautiful. This is, wow, I feel like, P.A. Mondrian and some of those artists I remember being affected by as an undergrad. I felt that way as an MBA student, like, oh, I get it now. So definitely, I'm a big fan that I think business education is valuable, and and it does have a lot of beauty for the students to learn. And so, yeah, it's controversial, but I'm a believer.
So, Dr. Schmeller, after California, you went to Indiana, right, for your PhD?
No, I've never lived in Indiana. So,
oh, really? Okay.
Yes, I got my MBA at Pepperdine when I was still working at Procter and Gamble.
And that's LA, right?
Exactly right. Pepperdine's famously located in Malibu, which is
Malibu Beach.
Yeah, pretty good real estate. They've got this incredible. The library has this incredible glass wall, and there's the ocean.
Wow.
So it was always like that. Wow, how can I be stressed out when the ocean's right there? Yeah. But they also have satellite campuses in some of the business or commercial real estate areas of Los Angeles. So I took most of my classes at those satellite locations, and because they matched my work schedule and my work locations. But I did get to know the Pepperdine campus pretty well because I actually lived in Malibu for a little while. So, but then I ended up. Let's see, my husband and I both worked for Procter & Gamble, and we ended up getting transferred to Arkansas. And we worked on the Walmart team for Procter & Gamble, which is basically like we used to tell our California friends, that's like being an A-list actor, because Walmart is really big in the world of consumer products.
Right.
So that was a big deal to get to work on that business, and it was great. But that's when I started teaching at the University of Arkansas. I dabbled in adjuncting, and so that's eventually we got transferred to Cincinnati, which is the hub of Procter & Gamble, and then we got transferred up to Northern Ohio. Oh, and in Cincinnati I taught at Xavier, and then in Northern Ohio we moved to Northern Ohio because J.M. Smucker is a big part of P&G in some ways. Many brands that used to be P&G were sold to J.M. Smucker. So
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, brands like Jif peanut butter and Crisco oil, and famously Folgers Coffee Company. So that's what brought us up here. My husband at the time was working for Folgers, and I was teaching at Xavier, and we got transferred up here to Smucker. So, and when I got to Northern Ohio, I met a neighbor who worked for Ashland University, who I had never heard of. And he said, oh, yeah, because I was looking for a place to teach in Northern Ohio. You should teach for us. So that's how that worked. And yeah, and then after teaching at Ashland for a few years, Ashland said to me, Rebecca, we appreciate your professional experience, but we want you to get a PhD so that you can also have the academic and the publishing and research arm of your work. So that's when I found Indiana State University, and they gave me a PhD after 4 years of really rigorous work. But it included an online program where I went once a year to Terre Haute, Indiana, for an intensive residency with my cohort. Yeah,
that's amazing. Wow.
Yeah, it was actually really cool. I learned so much from that whole experience. I learned a lot about distance education and the power of a cohort. And yeah, I was lucky to get that experience late in my career.
Right. I think it's interesting. I think it's extremely different when, let's say, you finish your undergrad and then you go to grad school and then your PhD versus someone who accumulated a lot of experience, professional experience before going to doing grad work. So you go with a lot of, professional baggage that you can, draw from and reflect on.
Exactly. And Rosine, you did a similar thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a gift.
Yeah, I was working full time while I was doing my grad work, both for my master's and doctorate. It's not easy for sure, but I think
Yeah.
it comes with some benefits too.
Yeah, that's right. I really, that would be another thing. Like, what do you think? Would you do it again that way? Or what would you recommend? Like to Zach, do you recommend
Ah,
that path?
I would say maybe hold on, on having a family probably, like, kids and until you're done with your doctorate. That would be my my choice.
And what
But
about you, Rosine? Did you do it with a family?
I did, yeah. And it was not easy. Yeah, tough times, but I'm very grateful for the family that I have and of course, but in retrospect, I think, mapping out your life differently would make things easier, I think.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good answer. I'm torn because same for me. I look back on those 4 years and think, are you kidding me? Like,
Mm,
was that me? Did I do that? It was so intense.
right.
At the same time, my children were very busy. I have 4 children, and they were in middle school and high school were the years when I was getting my PhD. And there was just so much going on. I look at my calendar from those days and think, how did we do that as a family? It was just crazy. But we got through it.
But there's the family aspect, but I also think mothers are much better at multitasking.
There
I,
is a
I I
lot.
don't think that's one of my fortes. So
That is a legend that people say. I used to have a mentor at P&G, and one of her quotes was, "If you need something done, give it to a busy mom." Which is actually,
there's some truth to that,
yeah,
for
I think
sure.
that might be. It's kind of interesting. But that's an example of where the family arrangement, or as Zach
Right, right.
said, dynamic, is really important. Because, like, I know in my case, my husband was critical to those 4 years. We
Oh, really?
definitely, I mean, he
Of
just
course. Yeah.
completely picked up so many tasks that really I just basically, outsourced to him for all of those years. Yeah. And actually, neighbors and friends, it was remarkable. We had so many people supporting us.
Yeah. I bet there's a lot of weaving, as a TED Talk speaker once said. So what you do is you weave and you keep going.
Hmm. That is a good metaphor.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why it would be hard for me to say, like you're saying, your advice would be to maybe not do it that way. But then at the same time, I feel like that was so valuable. Maybe we did do it the right way.
Maybe, I don't know.
It was so hard. And
It
I
just
think maybe that was good for our kids to see us do something really difficult.
right, right. But I think there's a lot of guilt associated with it too. When you feel like you're not there for them, certain moments, maybe at that time you think those were critical moments, but I think overall, it is
Yeah.
what it is, right? You just move on
True.
and
This
yeah,
is where
you
that phrase really comes in handy. But
you
there's
do your best.
one phrase that I used to use a lot when people would ask me about that, like the guilt. I My answer was, in some ways, I feel like this has been a gift to my kids because I have not been there for them. Maybe it gave them a break from me. Like, I would have been maybe overbearing or even maybe too worried about them because they were going through so many transitional times. And because I was so preoccupied with my own challenges, maybe that was a gift to them that I was not aware of all of their challenges, or maybe sugarcoating it.
Yeah. Well, it's a nice perspective too, to, think about it that way. What do you think, Zach?
Yeah, I think the phrase I've heard before is like the golden chains, the family, the house, and the job, I think are the three things that make up the golden chain. And so they say that once you have those three things, it's hard to keep going in your academic career.
Hmm.
Um, so I think I've heard the advice that you gave before, Mohsin, that you should wait on those things. But then that also makes it harder because you're getting your PhD so young, hypothetically. And so then you're not going to have that work experience that is so valuable. So I think it's like that balancing act.
Right,
Um,
right.
but Yeah, I mean, I guess each field is different too, though. So,
Right.
I don't know. Yeah.
Very
Still got
wise
some time to
answer,
think
Zach.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah, Zach, that's really good. You know so much. I'm really impressed. You even know about the golden chain. Wow.
I know.
That's so great. Yeah.
Dr. Schmeller, let's talk about the classes you're teaching. What do you enjoy most about teaching undergraduate as well as graduate level courses here at AU?
Yeah, such a good question. It really depends on the course and the students. So yeah, like undergraduates and graduates, that definitely is a distinction of the it depends. And I know that even within the graduate group, there's the international students who are quite often MBA students, and then there are the fully employed MBA students who are quite often doing that thing that you and I did, Mosine, with their families and careers at full speed, that golden chain. And so those two groups are vastly different. And so I definitely enjoy them, but I enjoy them both in very different ways. And then the undergraduates have a whole other set of qualities that are vastly different. So I guess your question was, what do I enjoy most about those different groups? I can say for sure, because just last night I had a class with my MBA students who are all international students, and they're all living in the Ashland community. And oh my gosh, they are just remarkable. Every Tuesday night in Dalk 246, we have such a good time. There are 22 of them, and oh my gosh, they're just so...
Did you say 22?
Yes.
Wow.
They're really just so enthusiastic, very academically prepared. They show up having, read the material, outlined it. It's just a great group, and they each have very distinct and diverse work experience and even cultural experience.
What countries are represented?
China. I think we have 3 students from China, and we have, let's see, I'm probably getting the numbers a little bit wrong, 3 or 4 from African countries. So it varies between Nigeria, Ghana, sometimes Cote d'Ivoire. And then we also have one student from Afghanistan.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, and this is only the second time, I believe, that I know of that I've had a student from Afghanistan. And we also have several students from South Asia. So India, Bangladesh, Nepal. Yeah. So it's been such great diversity culturally and professionally. They've all had different experiences. So it's great. So that's why I love teaching that demographic, if you will.
Yeah.
And then I also, now with our Ashland MBA, one trend that we're seeing is a lot of our fully employed young professionals, Ohioans living in the Ashland, Akron, Cleveland, Columbus areas. They typically take the online MBA courses. For years, we taught them at satellite locations in Cleveland, in Akron, in Columbus. But in recent years, mostly because of pandemic, a big shift happened towards our online. And even before that, there was a shift happening because online was growing. Right. So that's another experience that turns out to be rather enjoyable, is having in that roster of MBA students, having such diversity. Of professions, industries, career stage. I have some MBA students who've been working for 20 years, some who've just graduated from undergrad. And then they're all working full time. So it's really fun for them. I love reading about their experiences. It's a lot of reading because it's online. So we have a lot of discussion forums where they talk about their work experience and use the course theory to make connections and analyses. So that's another group that I love. I always say I learn more from them than they do from me. They teach me so much.
It's amazing. Wow.
In all their different industries, yeah. And then the undergrads are a whole different, compared to those two stories I just gave, the undergrads are a whole other experience. And for different reasons, very enjoyable.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. That's great. And by the way, speaking of international students, Zach is also works for International Student Services.
Oh,
Yeah,
What's
I
your
was going to
title,
mention
Zach,
that.
for ISS?
So now I'm the outreach coordinator. So I work with like emailing and setting up the event. So I think we actually had Salma. Is she the Afghanistan student?
she is.
Okay, so she just gave our big presentation. We have a monthly presentation on exploring a different culture. And so she did one on Afghanistan. So we've had a lot of presentations from India, Nepal, Bangladesh, the three you mentioned. Coming up, we're hopefully going to have one from both Germany and Brazil. So I'm trying to coordinate that. We'll see if they're still interested when December and the end of November come. But yeah, and I know that I was just reading this article the other day that a lot of American like graduate level programs are primarily international students. They come here to get the education and they bring what they've learned back to their cultures. And I know that Ashland reflects that a lot. So I was wondering how much have you learned from them, or not maybe how much, but like what's one thing that you've learned from them that you've kept with you?
Mm.
Well, I just want to say this. I attended that presentation, Zach, the World Cafe. And the student mentioned her interest in launching a business selling traditional clothing from her culture.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
this is
so
a
there you
current
go.
student. I think this is her first semester, if I'm not mistaken, but she's thinking ahead, and that's something that I find interesting about Kobe, that practical, hands-on approach in preparing students. Well, I was an embedded coach. We were trying a different approach a while back, helping a couple of Chinese students in an MBA course. And this was back in maybe 2012, 2013. And in a class, the class was amazing. The person who was teaching the course, the professor, is also a business person, so he's got his own business, and it was all more like a round table of sharing experiences between domestic students with very minimal experience. We had international students with minimal and also extensive business experience, and then we had business owners from the community who were taking the course. It was interesting. Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Back to you, Dr. Schmeller.
Yeah, oh my gosh, that's exactly it. Like, that's the answer to Zach's question. It's like, I think your question was, what have I learned from those international students? And you just said it. It's those types of stories about their own business from their culture. And the presentation that Salma gave about Afghanistan, I was sorry I had to miss it, but we definitely discussed it in class. And she's such a great ambassador for her country. So, and yeah, the idea that she's, interested in launching a business, and that is, I have had many students, international students, who have been very hands-on with their business experience. Lots of different industries. So very entrepreneurial is what I found, which makes sense if you think about what it takes to be an international MBA student. There's a lot of kind of overlap in, I would say, personality and personal qualities that can also be useful in entrepreneurial pursuits.
Wow.
So I definitely learned from them in that way. And I learned also from them just I would say, I'm not sure what the right word is. The word that's coming to mind is vibe. I love their vibe. I love, there's this, it's interesting how culture really does influence just our overall presence, our aura in a room with people. And so I enjoy that from my international students because they have a different aura, a different vibe. And I like it. It's a very positive one. Yeah. So that's probably what I've learned from them the most. They're also very academically prepared. I like learning about their different, the way they write, and the way they work on assignments and projects, and the discipline. They have a different sort of work ethic than American students.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's talk about the importance of communication skills. What can you tell us about that in the context of today's business environment?
Yeah, such a good question. I know that's what I kind of reflected on as I was thinking about our time together, because I know you guys are primarily the writing center. I'm sorry, writing and communication center. And yeah, what a great center, Mohsin. You guys have done such great work. I mean, you mentioned the embedded coach all the way back to 2012 and 2013. And then I know I wasn't even around yet. I started in 2013, and I've seen that embedded coach model kind of weave in and out. There's that weave metaphor.
Right.
And many other things that you all have done over the time that I've been at AU. It's been really impressive, very responsive and adaptive. You guys are a perfect model for some of the things I teach, that, just businesses must be agile and able to change with the needs of their stakeholders. And that's what I think the communication center has done really well. So in business, we even have a course in business called Business Communication, and it is a part of our business core. So it's definitely critical. It's it kind of leads back, or it goes a little bit back to Zach's earlier question about business as a discipline compared to some of the arts and sciences courses. And I know I typically teach MBA courses and also seniors at AU in Kobe. So for that reason, I really focus on the fact that they're going to be professionals in a few months. And so one thing I do is I have them call me Rebecca. So when they try to call me Dr. Schmeller or Professor Schmeller, I usually correct them, because I want them to get accustomed to that idea that I'm their colleague. Even though I'm not quite their manager, but someday soon they'll have a manager but they need to get familiar with that culture of where when you're a professional, your manager is quite often your colleague. You just have different roles. And sometimes the direct report is actually making more money than the manager, or perhaps has more responsibility than the manager, but the manager has certain roles and responsibilities that define that person as a manager. So that's one example of communication. I try to get them practiced in that mindset of sort of self-management and understanding the difference between the roles, not necessarily the levels, because in business, that's very practical. So that plays out in communication also. So I have them, instead of using APA format or MLA or Chicago style, sort of an academic style with citations and references, I instead have students use business style writing, which is headings and lists and sublists. And instead of sentences and paragraphs, phrases and keywords, and extensive use of margin, we call it sculpting, margins which are varied and sort of point the reader. And then also font variety, bold, italics, underline. I spend a lot of energy on business writing using what we call streamlining and sculpting. And that's an old P&G thing that I learned. P&G is famous for the one-page memo. It's something that is just a big part of the culture at P&G. And that's the only way you can communicate effectively on one page is with headings, lists, phrases, and really useful sculpting, so that the reader, I always tell students to kind of blur your eyes and look at the screen. If you can't even read the words, you can still sort of tell what the message is just by the architecture or the structure of the screen, of the words on the screen. So I've had many students tell me that was breakthrough for them, that skill. And that those, especially MBA students who are in a work environment, they often say, oh my gosh, my coworkers are coming to me now and saying, where did you learn how to do that? So they really, and I've had that too in my own career. I've had people say to me, your emails are so easy to follow and respond to.
It should be. People don't have, a lot of time to decipher what you wrote. So it
Yeah.
has to be very clear, to the point, concise.
And with more than words.
Yeah, yeah.
Just using the headings and the bullet lists and the boldface, that can really be helpful.
The form expresses meaning too.
Exactly. It's style and substance. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask you one more question, Dr. Schmeller. What advice would you give to students who are interested in pursuing a career in management or business development?
Good question. I don't really know if I have any advice about that. I think it's the same advice that I would give for any career.
Okay.
So, and that would be maybe just that sense of awareness, back to our early comment about doors, just paying attention to what the doors are and noticing when they open and what the different pathways are. That's sort of like I guess a big, sort of very vague and philosophical advice. Technically, maybe the advice would be some of those basics, like paying attention, attention to detail and thoughtfulness. I guess maybe looking for the art, the beauty, the enjoyment. Like just finding a way to like, it took me 5 years, as I said, to realize how beautiful my work was.
Right.
Yeah, so maybe learning that earlier, and not just this thing, not just checking in and going through the motion, but actually feeling this sense of like, wow, this is so beautiful. I'm creating something. I guess maybe that would be advice, is try to have that mindset.
Love that. Yeah, being present in the moment.
Yeah.
Engaging fully in the experience.
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? It's exhausting. Sometimes I wish, even though it is so enjoyable, I think Monsignor and you're very similar. It does make our work meaningful, but it also wears us out, doesn't it?
Absolutely. But I think just being present and appreciating what you have and what you're, engaged in, I think that kind of changes the whole dynamics of the experience. Versus someone who just takes classes, I just want that A to keep that 3 point whatever GPA,
Yeah.
and not really thinking deeply about the experience and what you can learn from it and what connections you can make.
Right. Yeah, that's the challenge of teaching.
Yeah.
Figuring out how to provide that.
Yeah.
Because it's different for every student.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Schmeller, thank you so much. We don't want to take too much of your time. A big shout out to my co-host Zach for being here, and to Dr. Schmeller for sharing her valuable insights and experiences with us. And we really, truly appreciate your time and thoughtful answers.
Thanks, Mohsin.
Yeah, thank you for your kindness and your mindfulness. And we can sense your passion for teaching and for helping our students. So thank you for being part of AU.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the WoW podcast, where curiosity meets inspiration. Brought to you by the Writing and Communication Center at Ashland University.